It's okay if you're a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew.
It's okay if you're agnostic and you don't know what to do.
An all-inclusive celebration.
No contractual obligation.
Happy Chrismahanukwanzakah to you.
And pagans too.
Welcome to Simply Robotics, the podcast, a podcast exploring the animation industry one episode at a time. I'm your host, Monique. You can find me on all social media platforms at Simply Robotics, SimplyRobotix. When listening to the show, use the hashtag SimplyRoboticsPod to join in the conversation. Welcome everybody. As you heard on my last episode, and as you may have seen on my social media platforms, today is the first day of the 12 days of Chrismahanukwanzakah, or, I'm struggling to say that word, and we're going to struggle together. I put this on myself. It's a lot of syllables, and I have a lisp, which I hate even saying that word, so that word is a struggle, but that's what we're doing. This is my first time doing it, so it's a great idea I had, inspired by some friends. And so what it is, again, is 12 days of Chrismahanukwanzakah, right? And for 12 days straight, I'll be releasing a new podcast episode, and we'll be covering holiday animated TV shows and films. Today, we're starting with Klaus. It came out this year, 2019. It debuted on Netflix on November 15th. It had a very limited theater run. I think it was probably in the U.S. in somewhere between 8-ish to 10 theaters. In New York, it was only at 1, and it was at the iPix theater, and what have you. But anyways, it's on Netflix, so I watched it on Netflix. I wasn't able to see it in theaters. In the show notes, you'll be able to see the trailer. Maybe you want to pause the episode, watch the trailer, and then come back to it. If not, I'm going to keep going. So the synopsis for Klaus is: a simple act of kindness always sparks another, even in a frozen, faraway place. When the Smearensburg's new postman, Jesper, befriends a toy maker, Klaus, their gifts melt an age-old feud and deliver a sleigh full of holiday traditions. Well, I did good for the most part, right? So this film was directed by Sergio Pablos. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to assume things. So he is the founder of the Spa Studios, and here's what their bio on their website says: the Spa Studios offers the highest quality in animation, content and visual development, character design, and storyboarding. Founded by Sergio Pablos, he's a director, screenwriter, and animator. Our clients include Netflix, Universal, Blue Sky, Warner, Disney, among other industry-leading companies. The studio credits include Despicable Me, Rio, Foosball. Foosball is a pretty dope, I believe it's a Spaniard CG animated film. It's definitely worth checking out. Their credits also include Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Tarzan, Treasure Planner, and Netflix first animated feature film, Klaus. So that's kind of all the background about it. I haven't seen this before because this is a new film that came out. The first impression, I felt that I only saw it once prior to recording this episode. I felt that it's very, very charming. It's essentially Santa Claus's origin story. I feel like with the visual style, it will definitely hold up the test of time. It's refreshing. It's nothing we've really ever seen in terms of how 2D or traditional animation is handled. I feel like there still was CG elements to it with toon shaders, but we'll get into that. As for characters, as the synopsis says, there's a age-old feud in the town. So there's these two, groups of people that are not feeling each other, and they're basically like any other movie. They're bumping heads, what have you. Jesper reminds me a lot of Cusco from The Emperor's New Groove. So what I mean by that, in case you haven't seen The Emperor's New Groove, is that he's an entitled, spoiled, wealthy person that never has to do anything and basically has all their privileges stripped from them and is sent to be humble, and is manipulating and whining like the whole way through, essentially. Even down to his like visual character design, he does look like someone you've seen somewhere before in an animated thing at some point, and you just can't quite put your finger on it. That's, I think, is very like standard design for him. Klaus, the way that they approached this Santa Claus, it reminded me a bit of the Santa Claus in Rise of the Guardians. Now, they differ because the Santa Claus in Rise of the Guardians has like tattoos and is super edgy or relatively edgy. This one isn't, but he does come off as intimidating, which is intentional at first, and that reminded me of the Rise of the Guardians Santa Claus. Visual style. This is a very, very beautiful 2D traditional approach to animation. It looks like there could be some 3D elements, like I said, which had like a toon shader to match the characters and the rest of the environment. And I say this because of some of the way that the cameras were moving. They were like panning and like doing some swooping action, and I was like, there has to be some 3D models with shaders, because are the animators really animating this dynamic camera movement? Like, seriously? Sergio also said here in this like YouTube link, which I would provide the link below. Sergio said in this YouTube video called Claus The Origins that the way that he wanted to approach the visual style for this film was just like to imagine a world where CGI hadn't been invented. Where would traditional animation be today? And I thought that that was very like an admirable comment for him to make, because I feel like traditional, this is the thing too. I don't know, are we like lumping together 2D animation and traditional animation? Because like, for instance, you have 2D like Teen Titans Go, and then you have like traditional animation, more so Klaus. So though they're both 2D, they're both not really traditional animation. Do you feel like that's right to say? Like, I keep thinking about this, but to keep moving forward. So like, what would traditional animation look like today? Let's just use traditional in the sense of like Tarzan, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast type stuff, Pinocchio, Bambi. What would stuff like that look like in 2019, 2020? So I feel like with Sergio's approach, their technical approach and their pipeline for this film is like a part of what things would look like today for sure. It was so beautiful. Things were very like soft, and the lighting for it I thought was very, very like impressive, because these are 2D, meaning like flat. They're not 3D, they're not CGI characters and worlds and stuff like that. But the way that they're lit and textured, it's like they have a volume to them. They have mass. They have like like I said, like volume is probably the best word. Like I'm here using my hands, and I know y'all can't see me, and I'm just like I can't even express what I'm doing, trying to show like a globe. Like, they're mass, they have substance. So anywho, I just thought it was just like very visually very beautiful. I'm sure like you can pause the film a couple times, and I know we're talking about like animation, so maybe more like the scenic stuff, and it just like looked very, very pretty, and it'll probably make like a good holiday card or something like that. The animation style, so to a certain extent it made me feel like 101 Dalmatians and Aristocats. And even though those two films have a more like rough, kind of like scratchy line treatment to them, this one doesn't. This one is very, very clean. But the fact that those two films, as far as humans concerned, the humans are, I'm saying like, you know, they're kind of like limby, like they have like long limbs. I felt like that was really echoed with this film. And it's worth mentioning too, an animator, Andrew Chesworth, who is a director of One Small Step, that's a Taiko Studios Oscar-nominated animated short. He had this list of like animated films that you can say inspired the animation style of Klaus. And I remember vividly one of them was like Pinocchio, and Pinocchio's around the same time to a certain extent of 101 Dalmatians and Aristocats. And I feel like the animation style for real, like the way the characters are, some of the characters like move, and like the way they have overlapping action and what have you, is similar to those type of 1940s Disney, 1950s Disney animated films for sure. It's humorous. There's like physical comedy that to be expected. That's fun. 2 quotes by Sergio. He says, "It was very important to me that the film did not feel like it could have come out of any other studio, and it had its own personality without losing the broad appeal that's expected from a high-end holiday film." Now, this is true. With creating a high-end holiday film, the expectations are ridiculously high. I think Sergio was justified in making sure that this film delivered with the way that they were approaching animation, especially with the fact that they're doing it in 2D, where a lot of studios and parent companies are not trying to invest in something so risky because you just can't tell. He also says that I always felt like traditional animation should keep evolving. It should keep being pushed forward. So the aesthetic comes from discovering what we can add to traditional animation pipeline by incorporating today's tools, ingenuity, and creativity to make it look different. And I think they completely nailed the head on the head with that, with the animation style and the visual style. As far as storytelling, I felt like it was very good pacing. It was a simple story, the kind that was predictable, yet it wasn't boring. It's like you knew these things were going to happen because like we've seen enough stories played like just like this, just with different characters and people, but you weren't here like yawning waiting for the thing to happen. And I thought that was very comforting too, because especially as far as animation is concerned, I'm like, kids are not dumb. 1, 2, it's not only kids watching this stuff, so like you're being super predictable, and you're laying it on thick how predictable you are. Like, you know, why are you like, we're here to have a good time. So my final thoughts was that it was a very, very heartwarming film. I'd watch it again. I'd watch it with and without kids. I watched it with my mom. You know, she herself was surprisingly, she ended up watching the whole thing with me because 1, visually, it's like interesting looking. And 2, it's the origin story of Santa Claus, which we're not, well, I'm going to get into that, but like Santa Claus doesn't really have a definitive origin story. So it's just interesting to hear different people tell Santa Claus's story. My rating system, like I wasn't sure how I was going to start rating these movies, but I would say out of like holiday movies, I celebrate this movie. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 presents. I'm giving Klaus 4 out of 5 presents. And I know that's pretty high because now everything else has to be in comparison to Klaus and how I rated that. But I feel like I'm going to stand by that. So in the episode notes, I do have a link to some interviews that Sergio did. One is with ToonBoom, and he talks about the creative process, and hopefully you did pause the episode and watch the trailer. And if you didn't, that's fine. You can still pause the episode, watch the trailer, or you know what, maybe don't pause the episode and watch the trailer now. Finish listening to the episode, then start going and clicking all the links in the episode notes, because most of us have very linear thinking, and once we go, we're just going to keep going in that direction, right? There's also an animation magazine article by Ramin Zahed, and this is, I'm really hoping this is from Sergio. It looks like I just copied and pasted. I'm not too sure. I mean, we're going to read the article. You're going to read the article. I read it already. So the quote is, "I really like the way Nolan took the lore of an outdated character and made it relevant for modern audiences with Batman Begins. I thought it would be an interesting exercise to do a similar thing for popular characters from literature, folk tales, and history. I considered Dracula and Napoleon, but when I arrived at Santa Claus, I was surprised to discover that he didn't have one single widely accepted origin story. It was a mix of religion and tradition and lore, and each country had a different idea about him. So I felt that we had this great opportunity to try and fill that missing chapter for him. And if we could do it with a good dose of humor and heart, we might be able to create a true Christmas classic." And I feel that like Sergio, he delivered, he accomplished. Santa Claus doesn't have one particular origin story. And with like, for instance, The Rise of the Guardians, I think that's pretty interesting how like Santa Claus is teamed up with Jack Frost and the Easter Rabbit or the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and the Sandman. Like that's like an alternative Santa Claus. And I feel like the way that they talk about Santa Claus and Klaus, with him being like a toy maker in the cabin somewhere or whatever, I thought that was pretty interesting. And the interaction with Jesper, who's the main character, and Klaus, and what was also interesting is like how we arrived at the whole Santa's riding in a sleigh, and how he's able to deliver all this stuff overnight, and how he's able to fit down the chimney. Like all these things are like explained And in this movie, and I thought it was an interesting take on like how we arrived at all these different things that we understand and believe or believed Santa to have done. And then I have a third link, which was just about like the 2D style. That was by Ian Fales. So these episodes are going to be really, really short. Obviously, like you can see the time now. I've gone, some maybe longer than others, depending on, I guess, how excited or how passionate or how bad or good of an impression I got for them. I just felt that Klaus was the best one to start off with because it's the newest one. It literally just came out a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago by the time this episode actually ends up coming out. I'm very excited to be doing this. Like, I think, I'm like, this is the best idea I had all year. Like, I've had a lot of good ideas this year, but this is definitely one of the better ones. I was also trying to figure out if I was going to tell you in each episode what the next episode would be, but I think it's kind of fun to let you guess and wonder. So again, you can at me on social media. You can use the hashtag SimpleRoboticsPod and let me know what you think about Klaus if you watched it. If you read the articles, let me know what you think. If you haven't watched it, watch the trailer. And again, let me know if you're going to watch it. If you're going to pass, and it's, completely fine. No pressure. If you're like, you know what? I'm going to sit this one out and let's see what else she talks about in this. But again, tomorrow would be day 2. I'm looking forward to talking about that one. That film, I would say, is another one that I haven't seen before, but it's still, well, hopefully, it should be still on as a Netflix animated film as well. And there's a bunch of things that I haven't seen that you may have seen that I'm gonna be talking about. So that's exciting. Maybe we'll see some of the classic ones, things that you've seen over and over and over and over and over again ever since you were probably like 2 feet tall or something. We could talk about those. Again, my social media is Simply Robotics, SimplyRobotix. The website, simplyrobotics.com. As I said before, I have noticed, it has been brought to my attention that a chunk of you listen on iPhones and are probably using that purple podcast app that is automatically placed on your iPhone when you purchased your iPhone or however you received it. Maybe it was gifted to you. That I don't know. Yeah, but I do know that if you use the podcast app, you can rate this show by giving me 5 stars. You just click the 5th star. And maybe if you're feeling extra generous, it's the holiday spirit, you can leave me a review too. I would love to read it. But anywho, you can do all that. Now, it's been fun. Let's get on to day 2. Bye.
Happy Chrismahanukwanzakah.